Today we're going to be looking at a preacher from St. Catharines, that's near Toronto, in Ontario, in Canada, who because of Trump has anger issues. This is an Anglican priestess. For those of you who do not know what Anglicans are, if you're American, it's an Episcopalian. If you're watching this from England or anywhere else, the Church of England. Now, this indeed was a very strange sermon, and I did listen to all of this sermon. In this first clip, we see that people are so upset with Trump that people are calling this illness Trump anxiety, and it leads people to anger management and stress and everything else. She also claims she's not an angry person, although she's going out and having bursts of anger. Let's give her a listen.
I just don't know how I could bless Donald Trump right now. I had a couple of occasions this week where I had these sudden, disproportionate outbursts of anger. And I don't really consider myself an angry person, so I was quite taken aback by these outbursts. And yet when I was able to take a step back and breathe, I realized that the thing that I was really upset about was only like the slightest bit about the thing. And most of it was about the volatility and the uncertainty of the political climate that we're all swimming in right now. Across North America, therapists are coining a phrase called Trump anxiety. They are telling us that they continue to have people coming to them for help and naming real physical health impacts and mental health impacts that they are suffering as they try to navigate this sea of anxiety. They talk about things like loss of sleep, change of appetite, increased alcohol consumption, and yes, some anger management problems.
She closes her sermon with saying that she cannot bless or even pray for Donald Trump. Let's give her a listen.
That call of Jesus to pray for our enemies and to bless those who would do us harm. We were reading a little passage from a book, and I had a really visceral gut reaction to this call. I said to the group, I'm like 99.9% there. Like, I think I could offer words of blessing for anyone. Except, I just don't know how I could bless Donald Trump right now.
Now, this is the sadness of the church in Canada. This is where the Canadian church is at. Clergy ought to be examples of prayer, of holiness, of trying to bring stability to people's lives when things in Canada are a little bit, an upheaval. There is nervousness. I want to acknowledge that. But here we have a not so good, a bad example, a pathetic example of a person in ministry. What was most shocking about this sermon was there was no scripture, no hope in the Lord, no comfort from the Lord, no resting in God. It was all, this is bad, this person's bad, and we're all dealing with this bad stuff. Many Canadians are nervous about the political climate and economic future of the country. And the point of this video is not to get into the politics of any Canadian or American or any other politician, but to correct the false teachings in these clips that you've just watched and to offer a solution from the Bible in dealing with political upheaval and nervousness of what's going on around you. The first thing I want to say is that if you have anger, it is not any political leader's fault. It's not any other situation has caused that anger but yourself. You are responsible for your own sin. Yes, things can cause you to be worked up, but you're the one who got worked up, and you are the one who sinned. It's not any political leader's fault that you're having outbursts of anger. James 1:14 says, when each person is tempted, he's lured and enticed by his own desire. When we sin, it's because we're lured by our own desires, our own sinful desires within us. Number 2, Jesus does call us to pray for our enemies in Matthew chapter 5, verses 44. And that's not the enemies that we like better. Those are all enemies. Those are people whom we like the least. That's why they are an enemy. And as well, we are called to pray for political leaders in 1 Timothy chapter 2. Pray for all these political leaders so that, in essence, they would come to know the Lord. And the final thing, in correcting this mess of a sermon, I want to point people to the book of Lamentations, where we are called to rest in the sovereignty of God. In the book of Lamentations, it really describes the life and the nation of Israel as they are in exile, as they are suffering, and they're suffering really because of their own sin. And they rebelled against God, and they experienced the judgment of God. And things had just gotten so desperate with the people of God, they were even eating their own children. It was a purely a place that was decimated, and a horrible experience for all those involved when Israel was exiled to Babylon and the land was left in an absolute desolation. But Lamentations ends with a wonderful promise, the sovereignty of God. Lamentations 5:19. But you, O Lord, reign for ever and ever. Your throne endures to all generations. And there in Lamentations 5, we see that the Lord's reign is forever and ever. It's very similar to Psalm 93 to Psalm 99, where we hear about the Lord's reign is forever and ever. And He's a sovereign God, and He rules over all things. And as a Christian, if you're in Jesus Christ, you can find rest in the sovereignty of God, even in political upheaval, economic turmoil. In fact, over my life, we've went through, in the last 50-ish years, we've been through many economic turmoils, and the message would still be the same. Rest in God's sovereignty. And instead of preaching anger, complaining, and whining, how about as preachers offering solutions that are biblical instead of unbiblical? You can trust in the Lord who reigns over all things. And even just looking at the last several verses of Lamentations chapter 5, restore us to yourself, O Lord, that we may be restored. Renew our days as of old. Calling out to God. Don't forsake us. Please return to us. And we know that God has not forsaken us because He's given us His only Son. And Jesus came to earth to pay the price on the cross for sinners. And you can find life and joy in Jesus Christ. Just turn to Him. Just trust Him and His work on the cross. Thanks for watching, and God bless.